So now let's transition into our first session. The first session is entitled Promoting Financial Aid as a Mission-Driven Profession to Support Student and Institutional Success. Today, we are joined by Dana Kelly, Vice President of Professional Development and Institutional Compliance at the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, Sarah Mariner, who is the Director of Financial Aid at Hood College, Nasim Reich, who is Assistant Director of Financial Aid at the Community College of Baltimore County, and Kiana Smith, who's a Financial Aid Counselor at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today. Before we get into the discussion, I would like to conduct an informal survey, and I promised everyone I did not tell them what this question would be before they logged on today, but the question is, could you raise your hand if your employment in financial aid began with an experience in federal work study? Wow, okay, I saw a hand, okay. I see several hands popping up. Wonderful. I spent about 6 years in a financial aid office, and so many people that I worked with told me, well, I started as a federal work study student, and the director saw something in me, invited me to stay on, and financial aid just became my life. And so it's interesting to see so many hands go up, but to see our panelists here say no. So I wanted to begin by asking you all to describe how you got into the field of financial aid, what led you there, and how that was similar or different to what you pursued on your own higher education path.
Well, I kind of fibbed a little bit because I was work study, but in admissions. I was not work study in financial aid. And I think that's when I knew I had entered the dark side once I did, and decided initially when I graduated high school, I went away to college and I got a job in the admissions office working as a hostess coordinator. So anytime a student wanted to visit the campus and stay the night, I did their entire trip basically, and I had more of a bubbly personality. Financial aid has ruined me just a smidge. I'm a little darker these days, but I would say that I spent more time with the students and I like that interaction. But then when I decided I didn't want to finish at that school and I came home back to Maryland, I needed a full-time job and I needed full-time work and a car and all those other exciting things that you need to have. And I started, I submitted a job application for a part-time job at which was the College of Notre Dame at the time, which is now Notre Dame Maryland University. And somehow the Women's Day program got my resume, and I was hired to be an admissions financial aid person. And that's when they decided to combine those two offices, which I would have never done. But in any case, that's where I started, and I stuck with financial aid. And 22 years later, this is actually my 22nd anniversary, I would say, in August, that I have worked in higher education. And it's been a very fulfilling experience, sometimes extremely difficult, but also very rewarding.
Wow. And you all, pardon me, I'm taking notes because I know you all to some degree, but all of this helps us just fuel the types of programming and offerings that we provide to the greater financial education and wellness community. So I'd like to pose the same question to Sarah. How did you get into financial aid?
So it is a roundabout way as well. I first came to the US as an international student. I went to Morgan State for my bachelor's. And then I went right into my master's at Tulane University. And I happened to graduate in 2008 when the economy took that downturn and I could not find a job, but I wanted to be productive. I took the first job that I could get, which was at Bath and Body Works. So I worked in the mall, in the store. I want, earn a little bit of money. And one night this lady came in. It was close to closing time. And I was the only one in the store in the front room. So I was helping her, just being polite, just making sure she got what she needed. And before she left, she approached me and said, "You have really good customer service skills, and I have an opening in my office, and I would really like you to apply for that job." And it was Dr. Charisse Carlin, who was at the time the associate director at Howard Community College. And I did apply for the job. They called me for an interview, and I was hired as a front counter staff member. at that community college in 2009, I believe. So this is my 13th year in financial aid. So it wasn't the traditional route. And my first degree is in telecommunications, and the second is in Latin American studies. So I'm bringing that international student perspective, non-traditional student, because I did start a little later as well. And it's not, everybody has a different story. Some of them are really funny, and I love to hear the stories from everybody else and how they ended up here and why they stayed. And I stayed because it's always interesting. Things are always changing, and I can actually see the impact that I make with our students. And that is very fulfilling for me.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Sarah. I just held on to what you said about staying, because in my mind, I'm thinking about this profession, and we're, talking about restoring a mission. And if there wasn't a mission that drove you there, something has to keep you there. So that impact is very nice to hear. I'd also like to pose that question to Kiana over at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, because she has a master's in social work, and that's a combination with financial aid that you don't often see. So Kiana, tell us about your experience.
Okay, so I got into financial aid randomly too. My background is in social work. I was doing school-based therapy, and I knew that I wanted to get out of that, but I wanted to work with young people. And so when I started looking for, different opportunities, there was an opening for a verification specialist, which is initially how I started. So I applied, I got an interview, and they took a chance on me. So I did that for 6 months, and then a position became available for a counselor. So I applied for that. And here I am 4 years later. I just actually entered my 4th year. So.
Wow. Okay. So we've got almost 40 years of experience between just the three of you. Congratulations on staying. I'd like to bring Dana into the discussion, because now that we talked a bit about your background at the state level, Dana brings that national perspective. So the first question I'd like to ask Dana is about how she ended up in financial aid, but also to tell us about the recent publication that NASFAA issued. It's called Financial Aid Administrators Face Intensifying Staffing Challenges Amid the Pandemic.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I was a little slow on the uptake. I did begin technically in work study. I was a financial aid work study student, went on to graduate school, thought I had left financial aid behind, needed a job, and ran into my old supervisor in the grocery store one day. And she said, "Hey, we have an opening. Do you want to come back?" And the rest is history. My career has taken me from a financial aid counselor to a director for several years. And then I moved into what the profession refers to as the dark side, went into student lending for a little while, student loan servicing, where I got my feet wet with national training, and then moved into my role at NASFAA, which has also evolved since I have been there. So to say I have a passion for training and the profession is a bit of an understatement. You mentioned a survey that we did recently with our members on sort of the status of the profession, where we are, what we are facing. And it came back with some fairly concerning results. We found that more than 500 individuals responded to our survey. And what we found was that we have reduced capacity in nearly 50% of the offices across the country. Our offices, or our members, are also experiencing very significant turnover rates. The other primary concern out of the survey, and this is a big one for me, and I think any of the panelists today, if you understand administrative capability requirements that are placed on the financial aid office, this was elevated as a significant concern for individuals who took this survey, because there's a concern that and a fear that they're not going to be able to meet that challenge, and it's more than a challenge, it is a federal requirement. So that's definitely concerning. And lastly, I would like to highlight the difficulty in hiring. Financial aid as a profession needs to find its voice. It needs to find its place at the table in Higher Education Administration, I believe. And because we're not quite there yet, we're not given the salary, we're not given the incentives to bring individuals into this profession. So I was certainly thrilled to be a part of this panel today to raise awareness and to recenter our efforts because we absolutely are a mission-driven career.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. I pulled some stats from the survey too, and the one that was really concerning to me is that 66% of respondents from that's the Eastern Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. So from this Eastern region, 66% of respondents reported being concerned about their ability to adequately serve students. That's 2 out of 3.
Yes.
So, and what I'm thinking is that if 2 out of 3 are willing to say that, then there are probably several more who feel that way, but might not want to fill that bubble in on a survey. So I would like to ask our panelists, what are you doing on your campus to kind of quell that feeling of not feeling as if you're able to serve the students? What are some actions that you have put into place on your campus to improve the student experience?
I said not all at once, everyone. Yeah, I think, Tisa, your question is very difficult to answer in my mind. I think that there are layers of things that are going on. Okay. As someone who's been working in this industry for 22 years, the kind of students and the things they needed 22 years ago are completely different than what they need today. Kiana, you mentioned you have a background in social work. Honey, this is the job for you. The kind of the things that we're required to do for our students, it's not financial aid. It's, I have food insecurities. I have, housing problems. I have all sorts of issues that I don't think any of us were equipped to deal with. So I think, and I work at a community college, so I can say that, but the thing is, it no longer plagues just community college students. So I think the thing is that getting someone to buy into the fact of working in higher education, specifically financial aid, is very difficult. And I also want to mention that years ago, you had ebbs and flows in financial aid. There were times where you had some breaks in between there. There are no breaks anymore. You have so many, administrative responsibilities to the federal government. Maryland has also beefed up how much they need from us. So, that's another layer that's going on. And then on top of all, I always feel sorry for my supervisor because of all the work she has to do with all the auditors, the layers and layers and layers of auditing. And I think the thing, when you look at it on a grand kind of scope of the way that we work in this field, you don't want the student to be getting the short end of the stick, but at the same time, you have all of these things that you're responsible for. And I also want to say that someone took the time to work with me when I was 20 years old and I started in aid. I can tell you as a supervisor, I find it very difficult to take the time to mentor my staff like someone mentored me. And it's mostly because we have so many other responsibilities that I just can't spend the time. And that's why before you could hire someone like Sarah, someone was like, wow, I love your customer service. And you can build on that. Today, we don't want to hire anyone who doesn't have financial aid experience because of the amount of time it takes to train someone to get them to a level where they understand all the federal policies and the state policies, and have customer service skills and not be scared of presenting in front of groups of people. And it's a lot. So I think, Tisa, I've kind of talked about a lot of things in this response, but at the end of the day, all of these things affect our end goal, which is to serve the students. And we're not going to be able to do that efficiently if we have all these obstacles and barriers that are stopping us from getting to that end goal.
Wow. I wanted to give a quick shout out to EASFA, the Eastern Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, because they recently created a program called EASFA Mentors. They have recognized that people in the field are strained and haven't had as much time to invest in the next generation of financial aid professionals. So they created this program to make connections and hopefully build relationships that draw people into the field, but also retain them, because that constant cycling in and out, it definitely has an impact on the students, and that's what we would like to avoid seeing. Sorry, you've been very active in EASFA. You have also been a mentor to many, and you're now at Hood College. So I wanted to pass it to you just to ask you, now that you're at Hood, what do you think that you can do to build up the student experience through investing in your financial aid staff?
Right. Thanks, Tisa. This is a really important question, and I'm glad that we're all here to try to work it out together today. And Nasim, you said so much and covered so many points that I was trying to write down to bring up. And the one thing that I want to add to that is support at the leadership level at your college. And maybe it's too early in the conversation to throw that out there, but I don't want to forget it, to make the point that some of the experiences I've had or some of the things that I've heard from my colleagues is we're trying to streamline and make things more efficient, but they're turning some of the things we do into more of a transactional nature. And considering what Nasim brought up, the things that our students actually need from us, especially since I don't know if we're coming out of the pandemic, I feel like we're still in the pandemic. So I don't know how to term that. This state we're in right now, we're everything to the students. We're the counselor, we're the mom, we're the dad, we're the sibling, whatever they need. Whenever they come to our office, the expectation is they always pick up the phone, their office is always open, and they will walk me over to somewhere else or another resource. We cannot let go of that. We cannot let go of that connection to our students just because we want to streamline and make things better. That will come with time. But it's very important to me, and I'm very proud to say that I have that support at Hood. With the leadership here, they recognize that we have to do things a little differently and maybe give a little more of ourselves for our students, especially now. And some of the things we're talking about in my office are programming. We're calling it programming. What events can we have for our students? How can we meet them where they are? We're trying to think of surveys that we can engage them with, and incentives that would encourage them to come up to our office and let them know, hey, I know we're financial aid, but if you have a question about something else and you're not sure, we will work to get you in touch with the right people. So how do we get that messaging out? And leadership, or at least my supervisor specifically, we're talking about how we can engage the other offices we work with, because we don't function in a bubble. And we can't do this by ourselves. The word has to be spread across campus. This is what all the divisions do. This is what all the offices do. This is how we work together. So no matter where a student ends up, whether they're in crisis, they just have a quick question, or they just want to say hi, or they're just strolling across campus, they know that whoever they reach out to, our network is very connected. We have the same message, we have the same goal. So it's a bigger project than just the financial aid office saying, hey, we're going to have a Halloween party and we're going to invite all our students and we'll have a photo contest or something like that to get them engaged. It's okay, you're doing that. How is that connected to your work with the accounting office or academic advising? How do we have that holistic, linked approach to what our students need, and when do they need certain things? So right now we're working on getting that information from our students. What do you need? When do you need it? In the past 2 years, what has happened that you needed help with and you couldn't find it? How can we meet that gap? How can we cover those things for you? So, we joke about it a little bit that we do everything, and we're the be all and the end all for our students whenever they need it. And that's going to continue. I don't see that ever changing or ever lessening even. It's more important now more than ever, that human connection.
Wow. This is really making me focus on you, Kiana, because I'm thinking about social work. And while my initial exposure to financial aid was like, sorry, it's about customer service. Somebody saw, oh, you're nice to people, you'd be good in this office. And they teach you all the financial aid things later. But social work, you have been trained specifically to deal with those human connections and helping people work through difficult issues. And so I'd like to hear from you about what you're seeing in UMES and how that social work lens is applied in your day-to-day responsibilities.
For me personally, I do get to use like a lot of my social work tools here, which is perfect. And I really love what I do. So we've been very fortunate. Our current vice president of student engagement, she connects all of our offices within her division. So that includes financial aid, it's including housing, a CAS department, which is like tutoring, academic support, those things, counseling center. So all of us work together. We generally meet at least weekly or bi-weekly, just to see how we can better serve our students. So she's created a food drive for students on campus. And then within our office personally, we host weekly events for students where we actually go out onto the campus and just set up and engage with students as they come through. For me personally, I also coordinate SAT. So I do get to see a lot of the students, I guess, personal things that are challenges for them as students, which is really helpful in terms of context and connecting them with other resources that they need. So I do also get to use my social work skills a lot with the counseling aspect as well. It does sometimes take away though from my actual counselor duties, like administrative duties, because of course, students do need a lot of support. But for me personally, that's really where my heart lies. So I always want to, be there for the students as much as possible.
Right. So you mentioned your VP, LaToya Jenkins, the University of Maryland teacher. I just wanted to give her a shout out because she is definitely a leader who cares. And I appreciate the work that she's doing to get the units to connect, but also to increase student success. So thank you to Mrs. Jenkins. I want to circle back to Dana though, just to talk about it, the national perspective. What about the types of policies and offerings that NASFAA has presented to help people who are in financial aid grow as professionals? We know that social work, that's a special area that Kiana, came into financial aid with, and the financial aid side of it though is so particular because there's so many administrative requirements, compliance, rules, audits. There's so much that has to be taught. And I'd like for you, Dana, to tell us about NASFAA's efforts, including the certification that you now offer.
Absolutely. I do want to go back to something Sarah said, that the student success modeling is so important. And we're seeing that across campuses nationally. Financial aid is poised to be the conduit for that, because I often say financial aid touches every other student service office on campus, and that can't be said of other areas. But financial aid is unique in that way. So as aid administrators, we are poised to do a lot when it comes to student success. Part of what NASFAA is going to be rolling out very soon, in conjunction with our certification, we actually utilized our commission, which is our governing board for that program, to come up with a framework of what it means to be a financial aid professional. And we have developed a lot of not just the regulatory knowledge and the regulatory skills, but more of those human skills, more of those components that that I think really hiring managers are going to be forced to go back to. I certainly understand the desire to hire someone with experience, but what that survey is telling us is that they're not there. And with the tremendous amount of retirement that is happening within our profession as well, we are facing a bit of a gap. So we need to be able to bring people in who have the right capabilities in terms of those people skills, and then we can train them on the regulation. It absolutely is a complicated world, don't get me wrong, but you can teach that. It's harder to teach someone the capacity to understand the need for student support, the the business of an institution, right? If you can come in and you have underlying skills that are people oriented, we can bring you up with the regulatory information. And that's really part of where we were going with our certification program, is to the first step of certification is the exam, and that's your breadth of knowledge, but that's really where it starts. The gold that I like to say within our certification program is the continuing education that you get as a result of being certified that really helps you grow as a profession. We are actively working with a couple of universities to actually bring our certification program and other certificate programs into the master's degree area. So we want to really concentrate our efforts on financial aid as a profession. We want it to be a choice students make. So in order for that to happen, they have to have some exposure. So whether it's a master's of education program or a master's of leadership, any program that would touch on higher education administration in general, we want to give them the opportunity to focus in on financial aid, because irrespective of whether they go into financial aid or not, having that knowledge, as the ladies on this panel can attest, just having that knowledge of financial aid would serve a college president very well, would serve a bursar very well, would serve a student services professional very well, because it is so intertwined in everything within the college campus. So for our current aid administrators, the certification program exists. You do have to have some time in the program in order to be eligible, but we have a number of certificates. We actually have 16 certificate programs that focus in on specific aspects of the regulatory process that allow you to gain some specialty. And that is where I would send a new person. If I hired someone who was unfamiliar with the work of financial aid, I would direct them into that path. We've even broken them out so that if you are looking on, what do I do for my staff for professional development, we have like a three-step process. And these are the topics that they take first. And then these are the next topics they should look at. So that, in conjunction with the efforts that are already out there with Department of Education, there is an FSA coach opportunity out there. They're working hard to develop their training as well. But I think we all realize the importance for both the student and the institution itself to have a really, really strong department when it comes to financial aid and how it works with the rest of the institution.
Dana, you made me think about Tri-State. That's the Delaware, DC, Maryland Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, and that's actually where I met all the other panelists. Tri-State hosted a neophyte training experience in Ocean City, and it was fun, but it was also very informative. And I just think about that experience and how much the industry and how much I personally missed that during the pandemic, because that gave us a chance to reach people that were new to the profession, to build a community with them, to check in on them from time to time, to answer questions about what they were going through as newer professionals in the field. But I really think that, like you said, it's so important for us to remain connected. Federal student aid has its place. That's the source, and we need to make sure that we are in constant contact with them and getting, the most up-to-date information, and also remaining in compliance. But at the national level, you all encouraging professional development through the certification is awesome. ISFA is stepping in with ISFA mentors, as well as programming that they have usually every week through their Tuesday at 2 webinar series, and Tri-State, which is reemerging this year with in-person events. So Nasim, I want to ask you about your involvement in Tri-State. I don't remember if you came in, if you attended Neophyte as an attendee, or if you just jumped straight into the role of trainer, because you were heavily involved for some time. So tell us about that experience and how it helps you develop as a professional.
So it was funny because I remember my supervisor at the time had told me, well, you have it easy. You're going to Rehoboth Beach. I had to sleep with the monks. Because I guess back then they did have neophyte. The first couple of neophytes was in some kind of monk lodge and they like had to make their own bed and breakfast. I don't know.
Wow.
There was something that went on.
That
anyway.
was before my time.
Yes, way before my time too. So and now it's in Ocean City, but for the longest time it was in Rehoboth Beach. But yes, I started out at neophyte. If anyone knows Colleen at UMBC, she was my neophyte roommate. And that was another cool thing, is that you had to room with someone you didn't know. And so I got to meet her and connect with her, which was really cool. And, you know, I remember the week was really, it could be very tiring at times. Now, I had worked in the profession, obviously, for a little bit, but, you know, I had gone from a private four-year college to a community college, and that completely changed the dynamic of what I needed to know and how things were kind of functioning. And I feel like, and this is no disrespect to the four-year schools or private schools, but it's really where I learned the meat of financial aid. You know, that's where you really learn what you need to know, and kind of, you know, all of the crazy things that are thrown at you, you learn how to deal with that more, I would say, than if you were at a private school or a four-year school. And I started there, and then I immediately got involved because that's just who I am. So, you know, I started at Tri-State, and back then they used to have like happy hours, and I'm going to throw out a name. I think some people on here know Sandy Brown worked in financial aid, and Sandy Brown has said to me, I see a leader in you. I really feel like you should run for Maryland president. And I was like, okay, cool, I'll do that. So I did, and I became Maryland president, and I was Maryland president for 2 years. After that, I became the vice chair of Tri-State. I also served on the ISFA board, obviously, because I was Maryland president for 2 years. And then I met so many great people at ISFA that then I became the technical services chair for ISFA. I was on there for several years for that. And on top of that, I feel like I was doing a lot of things. I used to design the logo. Kiana, your background is in social work. Mine is in publication design. It has nothing to do with one or the other. So I always designed all the logos and all the materials for the Tri-State events. And yes, I presented at Neophyte pretty much every year on any topic: customer service, professional judgment. In fact, I think most people from back in the day know me because I was always at Neophyte. And I met a lot of great newbies in financial aid. But honestly, it's excellent professional development. I very much enjoyed connecting with others. And I have to say, commiserating with other financial aid people is amazing because, you know, I'm biased, but I don't think others at the college go through what we go through. You know, I'm always like, oh my God, can you believe this? And I will also say this: financial aid people are the most giving people to other financial aid people. If I need code or I need something, I can call on a colleague and be like, okay, please don't make me reinvent the wheel. What can I do to do? Literally, they'll give me all the SQL code and I'm like, yes, you know, it's amazing. So I think the thing is that it brings a community, a band of brothers, if you will, even though most of us in financial aid are women, which I'm proud to say, because I think that's awesome. But I think it's just, we know what goes on, and between the professional development, also getting involved and giving back is what makes this, again, such a rewarding field. And at the end of the day, I mean, I'm helping my community.
Wonderful. And helping your community also leads to a better experience for the student. And I'm grateful that each of you mentioned things about the sector and how it's different depending on what type of institution you are working for. I know that when most people hear financial aid as a profession, some of them think, oh, well, it's pushing a lot of paper. It's kind of like being a loan officer. Some schools don't even offer loans. So there are different things that are part of the experience, but those things show up in different ways and at different levels of intensity, I think, depending on the type of institution that you're with. And Nasim, I understand from the community college experience, there's an added level of pressure there with meeting students where they are, because many of them are not coming along that traditional pathway to higher education. So while I'm thinking about it, I want to give a quick shout out to Charles Sheets, who's the financial aid director at Hagerstown Community College. He recently completed the CFAA through NASFAA. So congratulations to Charles. I have other colleagues who are studying for it right now, and I know that they are proud to know that that option is available to designate them as someone who is certified in that space. So I want to circle back though to the sector conversation and talk about how how the experience is different, so that as we're trying to intentionally fill this pipeline with more people coming into the field and hopefully staying with them, that we can tell them about the expectations are there and what that will look like from institution to institution. So Sarah, I'd like to start with you to give us a bit of the private school experience.
All right. So in terms of trying to attract and recruit talent, into our profession, and I always strive in everything I do and take advantage of these kinds of forums to be the example. And even when we're speaking with our students, I always tell my staff, we should be the example for the students of how they should be when they go out into the world. So always be, on your best behavior so that they know how to react and how to behave, and we're guiding them, right? But it's the same thing. And the way that I was recruited, it's different. It's not traditional. It's not like I even knew financial aid was a professional, because again, came in as an international student, didn't even know that there was this whole office that could help me or can do something else for me. But in terms of attracting that talent in the first place, especially now, and sometimes I feel, what happened to the nurses during the pandemic. And now I think a lot of nursing programs are struggling to attract students there. People who have been in the office, or they know of people and colleagues who've been in financial aid, and they've seen some attrition, whether it's because of budget cuts or, mental capability to cope with what's been going on, or the volume of work that's been, thrown upon us during the pandemic. How do we overcome that initial challenge? What would you say to somebody? How would you allay their fears that you're just asking me to jump in here into this fire pit and just start going? And something that Dana, you touched on as well about, recruiting and the administrative capability, which I love that course. Everybody who's on here, if you haven't done it, please take it. It's one of the best ones because it armed me with language and knowledge to take to leadership when I'm asking for hiring and for additional resources within the office. So, I have to, but that time that you would take, if you find that person, I'm not looking for the person with the experience anymore. I'm looking for the person who is capable and that person who can express empathy, who will be that ear for the student, who will have those soft skills, because I always say you can train anything. You can train anybody to do anything in the financial aid office, but you cannot train people to be kind to each other. That's something that's inbuilt. So that's the first thing. You have to prioritize, create your candidate personas. What is it that you are actually looking for when you come down to it? Forget about the skills and forget that, the federal regulations. What is the relationship you want your staff to have with your students, with the other offices? How do you envision this person interacting with the other offices? And what are the personality traits and qualities that go into that? And make your list and stick to that when you're looking for it. Who hits all of these things, most of these things? And also to entice people, you have to have that career ladder. And I always tell people, even if it's not within your office, don't think about keeping them here. You want to develop people and you want to see them grow. They go out into the world as your representative. You had a part in their professional development. So what can you offer in terms of trainings, webinars, membership in ISFA and Tri-State, which I found invaluable, when I was coming up in the profession? What other incentives, because salary is also an issue. Can we properly compensate people to come in and take on this volume of work, sometimes due to work of 3 and 4 people? That's how bad things have gotten at this point. So people want to learn. And are you also leaving some room open for them? If people come in, financial aid isn't really where they want to end up, but they're interested and they're doing a good job. are you carving out some time so that you can allow them to pursue some other interests? And flexibility, that's the one thing that leadership and financial aid directors can offer as well. As long as you have coverage, can you offer everyone in your office the chance to do remote work once or twice a week, or maybe have flex time to get in and out of the office? What can you do? You have to be creative, especially if you don't have the compensation part. What else can you offer somebody so that they're willing to put up with the lack of administrative capability at times, while you're working to do other things to get up to speed.
Sarah, I want to jump in just with one thing, because I see that we are coming up on the close. That went by really fast. I wanted to share something from the NASFAA report, and you touched on this too. It's about permanent FTE employees who transferred or resigned from financial aid. 69% of them left to receive a higher salary or better benefits. 35% of them left because they no longer had the desire to work in financial aid. And 29% of them left to move to a different office, but with the same institution. So I think that finding right there touches on many of the things that you all have mentioned today. And oh my goodness, I wish we had more time to dig deeper into this, and also the solution piece. But the solution piece is not something that we were going to figure out today during 45 minutes. But what you all have done is given us so much input that we can use to figure out where this conversation needs to go next, so that we can create some lasting change, because we know that what happens in the financial aid office most certainly it affects the student experience as well as the institutional experience. So in the minute that we have left, I'm going to ask you all, can you give me one word that drives the mission? I wrote down two from Sarah, and that was capability and empathy. But if you had to give just one word to help drive the mission, what would it be? And I'll start with Dana.
Collaboration.
Collaboration. All right, Nasim.
Can you believe I'm speaceless?
I did it.
Yeah, I don't. Oh man. Interpersonal connections. I don't know.
Okay.
Accessibility. There you go.
Accessibility. Okay, that's a good one. And Kiana, I'll give you the last word.
I would say commitment or intentionality, either of those two.
Right. Well, thank you all so much for giving us this food for thought about financial aid and how we can each be a part of returning that mission to the profession. Wow, that went really fast. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
At this time, we are going to take a quick 3-minute break, and then we'll return with our second session that's going to talk about basic needs after HERF. We'll be right back.